she's finally gone. At the funeral of his billionaire wife, he reached out to his mistress to celebrate, but what came after was beyond anyone's imagination. This is truly one of the greatest stories, my beautiful family. Welcome once again to your family channel, Revenge. With the Nachi. May the grace of God rest upon your lives, may His mercy never depart from your homes, and may His peace reign in every quarter of your family. May He bless your work with fruitfulness, crown your efforts with success, and fill your tables with abundance. May your nights be filled with rest, your mornings with hope, and your days with laughter. And above all, may your hurts carry a strength that never fails, faith that never wavers, and love that never ends.
Some men spend their lives building empires. Preston Vance spent 2 years building a lie vast enough to protect his empire, and a wall high enough to protect his heart. Audrey Hayes was the only woman who ever saw what lay behind that wall. I spent 2 years earning the right to be his secret, and then I watched as the rest of the world watched him bury his wife. The headlines called him the grieving widower, the king of finance, whose world had shattered. The truth, at his billionaire wife's funeral, he called his mistress to celebrate. And what happened next didn't just shock the world, it redefined what I thought love was. That night, at precisely 12:05 a.m., my phone lit up. The voice was raw, whispered, yet carried the weight of a monumental confession. "It's over, Audrey. It is done." That was the signal. But to understand the celebration, you must first understand the sacrifice. You must understand the lie that was so vast, it almost consumed the only truth we had. Let's go back. 2 years before the funeral, I was the head designer for Vance Industries. I was a woman who prided myself on structure, on knowing exactly where the lines were drawn. Until I met Preston. He didn't just blur the lines, he erased them with a single devastating kiss. The first time he told me he loved me, we were in his private gallery, a place he ironically called the observation deck. It was a sanctuary, layered with aged cedar and the sterile scent of wealth, a tribute to his clinical detachment. But for us, it was the only place the armor came off. The board meeting is set for the 17th, he had stated, his voice a low, gravelly current, discussing corporate logistics to avoid the emotional precipice we stood upon. I looked at his severe silhouette against the twilight. His power wasn't just in his fortune. It was in his stillness, the terrifying focus he brought to every movement, every word, and every clandestine touch. "And what about the Audrey legacy, Preston?" I asked, challenging him from the velvet chains. "Is that also secured?" He turned then, and the force at his gaze, dark, demanding, incandescent, made my breath catch. He crossed the distance between us not in steps, but in a predator's glide, stopping just short of touching me. The tension was an audible hum, a promise about to be violently fulfilled. "You are my legacy, Audrey. You are the only truth I carry. Don't you ever forget that." The truth, however, had a contract ticking on it. Preston needed a wife, a strategic marriage to secure the controlling interest in his grandfather's trust. Juniper Steele was the perfect icy business partner, complicit in the charade that demanded 2 years of public unity. But the day Preston met me, that contract became a curse on both of our souls. The gilded gauge. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, so completely, that you were willing to exist only in the shadows, just for the chance to feel their warmth for a few stolen hours?
This is where I lived. Every single time we met, it was a ferocious, desperate surrender. That night, I reached for him first. I pulled his mouth down to mine. This wasn't a gentle kiss of reunion. It was the violent acknowledgement of the curse we were under. Our intimacy was the language we spoke when words failed. It was always born from this conflict, the lie we maintained for the world versus the undeniable fire that consumed us when we were alone. He caught my hips, lifting me onto the chase with an effortlessness that reminded me of his absolute control he lost only in my presence. He slid his hands beneath the soft fabric of my dress, tracing the line of my spine as if mapping the hidden history of my pain. "Tell me it's worth it, Preston," I pleaded, my voice a fragile sound against the sound of our rapid breathing. "It is everything," he answered, a red tremble in his voice, pressing his face into the curve of my shoulder, inhaling my scent, claiming me with a guttural sound that spoke of relief and ownership. He was shedding the persona of the untouchable muggle piece by piece, agonizing piece. I felt the cool, heavy chain of his watch graze my collarbone as he lowered me, following me down into the cushions. When he finally covered me, the contact was not rushed, but a deliberate, slow descent meant to mark every beat of my heart with the certainty of his commitment. Our passion was always an emotional excavation. Each touch was a promise, each joining a ratification of the fact that, in this secret room, our truth mattered more than all the contracts signed in the world. He moved with a reverence that belied his powerful frame, ensuring the pleasure was mutual, profound, and consuming. As the physical storm subsided, we entangled. The exhaustion of the lie temporarily lifted. Just 4 more months, Audrey. Just 4 more months until the clause expires and the truth can walk into the daylight. But I had learned to distrust timelines. The truth in our world was rarely invited. It had to be dragged out screaming. The public knife. 3 weeks later, the lie became violently real. It was the annual Vance Nation Gala, a public display of wealth and unity. I was present, forced to watch from the peripheral tables as Preston and Juniper commanded the spotlight. Juniper, statuesque and flawless, held Preston's arm with possessive ease. As they posed to the cameras, Preston's eyes found mine across the ballroom. There was a flicker of anguish, a warning I recognized, but before he could communicate any more, Juniper lifted his hand to his cheek, a gesture of wifely affection that was as cold as it was calculated. In that moment, I felt the cold, hard certainty settle in my chest. He would never choose me. The world he commanded was too large, too demanding. I realized I wasn't fighting for a future. I was fighting to survive, being the backup Pullen. I fled the gala, intending to lead the city, to lead the lie before the dawn broke. The sudden, insistent ringing of my door chime was jarring. It was Preston.
He burst into the apartment. Coat disheveled, the tailored facade shattered. He saw the packed bag instantly. "Don't you dare," he growled, the command primal. "I can't do this anymore, Preston," I whispered, turning away. "I am tired of waiting for the scraps of your life. I am tired of being the truth you hide." He grabbed my arm with a surety that anchored me. He turned me around and slammed me against the closed door, his body a solid barrier. This time, the intimacy was violent in its honesty, a furious argument conducted not with words, but with breath and proximity. "You think I don't want to burn the contracts, Audrey? You think I don't want to stand on that stage and tell the world that you are mine, that this entire farce is for you?" His breath was ragged. "You have no idea the depths I am in, the kind of sharks I am fighting to get us free." "The kind of sharks that look exactly like juniper steel?" I countered, the accusation stinging. That night, our collision was less about pleasure and more about survival. It was a raw, bruising need to find validation in each other's arms. He stripped away our clothing with the efficiency of a man shedding armor in a war zone, seeking the shelter of my skin. He moved with an anguished tenderness, his focus solely on my emotional need. He made love to me not with fever, but with a crushing, absolute commitment, staking his claim on my heart and body so definitively that I couldn't possibly walk away. "If you leave me now, Audrey," he said, his voice thick with a vulnerability I had rarely heard, "you leave everything we are to rot. I need you to hold the line for 4 more months. Do you hear me? Hold the line." I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper into me, sealing the pact with a silent, desperate assent. The cost of this love was agony, but the reward was the only true home either of us had ever known. The following month was a torture of public absence and private intensity. Preston was fighting a hostile takeover, and Juniper's inheritance was the key to retaining control. I watched the news, understanding that our freedom was tied directly to his financial survival. Then, an unexpected knock at my door. It wasn't Preston, it was Juniper Steele. Juniper, without her icy gala armor, looked fragile, almost transparent. She sat in my living room, not with malice, but with a weary resignation that shocked me into silence. "You hate me," Juniper stated simply. "You think I'm the villain who keeps him locked away. Aren't you?" Juniper took a slow, deliberate sip of tea. "I am the firewall, Audrey, nothing more. Preston and I have a bond that predates his grandfather's trust, a medical bond." The revelation that followed was the first real plot twist. Juniper wasn't just a business partner. She was a patient's guardian. Preston's first wife, a woman named Elara Thorne, was not dead, but in permanent, advanced medical care after a devastating car crash years ago. Elara was sustained by a specific, unique trust fund tied to Preston's business control. The true marriage was over, but the financial obligation, which provided the life support for the woman he had loved first, was unbreakable until a certain age or medical milestone was met, a milestone Juniper was contracted to manage. The public marriage to Juniper was a legal fiction, a tax and trust maneuver designed to shield the massive life-sustaining cost of Elara's care from predatory corporate lawsuits. If Preston had simply divorced Juniper or married me, the entire Vance fortune would have been exposed. I married him to secure his financial flank, Audrey, to ensure his fortune could not be touched by the vultures and that Elara would not be disconnected, Juniper explained, her eyes hard but honest. He is married to me on paper, but he is married to the ghost of his past and the obligation to the woman he already lost. The minute that medical trust matures, the legal facade dissolves. I stood there speechless. I had spent 2 years hating a rival, only to discover I was standing in front of a martyr. The enemy I saw was actually an ally protecting a far greater unseen vulnerability. "And when is that?" I whispered, the magnitude of the sacrifice suddenly terrifyingly clear. "The firewall contract." "In 6 months," Juniper replied, rising. Then she turned, and the flawless mask finally cracked. "But there's another reason I'm here, Audrey, and this one is far more personal." She pulled out a small laminated patient ID badge. "I have cancer, Audrey, aggressive. I needed to ensure the legal transition was finished before the final stage.
She spoke about her prognosis with the same detached precision she used when discussing stock futures. I needed to ensure you were ready to step into the light, because he will need you when the charade ends. Juniper wasn't the villain, she was the selfless protector. She was using her remaining life to ensure Preston wouldn't lose everything, the business, the legacy, and the life support for his first love, and that he would have me waiting when it was over. She looked at me, not with judgment, but with an odd sense of approval. He never told me about the depth of your love, but I see it now. You were strong enough to withstand the isolation. You just waited. The separation between Preston and I wasn't about a cold heart or a lack of choice. It was a profound, necessary act of protection, demanding a patience I was only now capable of understanding. Juniper left, leaving behind a silence that tasted of sacrifice and heartbreaking nobility. The lie didn't disappear, but the burden of it shifted. It was no longer a personal betrayal. It was a heavy cloak of honor we all had to wear until the final moment. Holding the line. The next few months moved with crushing speed. Juniper's health declined rapidly. The legal firewall was now fighting two wars, the corporate raiders and her own mortality. Preston, caught between his corporate war and the quiet, contractual ending of his false marriage, was a ghost himself. He reached out to me only through veiled, coded texts. There were no more stolen nights in the observation deck. The texts were sparse, but they confirmed his devotion and my importance. Code blue, firewall stability nominal, hold position. Code green, trust completion imminent, do not waver. I watched the headlines about Juniper's private medical leave, knowing the terrible truth. I sent flowers to the hospital under an anonymous name. I realized I was grieving her too, grieving the noble woman who had sacrificed her final months for the stability of the man I loved. When I finally got a text from Preston that simply read, "Code red, complete," I knew the end had come. The legal necessity of his marriage to Juniper was over. She was gone. The funeral arrangements began immediately, a high society spectacle designed to satisfy the world's appetite for drama. I was home, watching the coverage, knowing that the man I loved was finally, terribly alone. The public saw a widower, stoic and cold, mourning his young wife. But I saw the man forced to enact the role of the grieving husband one last, final time, his heart already exhausted by the secrets and the burden. At 7 p.m., the final eulogy ended. Preston looked down into the grave, a picture of controlled devastation, and the world nodded, satisfied with the performance of a man losing everything. At 11:30 p.m., the news reported Preston Vance had retreated to his secluded estate in the Hamptons. They said he sought solitude to mourn. I sat in the quiet dark of my apartment, waiting for the signal. The funeral was over. The contract was ending, but I still feared the finality of the act. Would the man who emerged from that darkness still be the man who loved me? The seconds stretched into an eternity. The midnight call. Precisely at 12:05 a.m., my phone lit up. It was Preston. I answered, my voice a nervous thread. "Preston?" His voice was hoarse, rough, a sound ripped from deep within his chest, devoid of any public facade. "It's over, Audrey. The trust is sealed. The lawyers are clear. It is done." The public would have heard triumph, callous celebration that the obstacle was removed. But I heard the exhaustion, the pain of a man who had finally put down a burden that had nearly crushed him. "I'm coming to you," I said instantly. "No," he commanded, "I'm coming home. And when I walk through that door, I want to see you dressed in nothing but the truth we
The drive from the Hamptons estate to my apartment in the city took less than 2 hours, a testament to Preston's disregard for speed limits. He arrived not in his usual armored vehicle, but in a stripped-down sports car, shedding the trappings of his status as ruthlessly as he had shed the lie of his marriage. I was waiting, standing in the center of my living room, bathed in the soft, gray light of the city. I wore only the confidence of my true identity. He didn't speak a word when he entered. He simply closed the door and leaned his forehead against the wood, letting out a sound that was half sob, half battle cry. The intensity of his relief was overwhelming. I walked to him slowly, every step a reaffirmation of my choice. I didn't offer comfort. I offered myself. My hands rose to cup his face, his skin cool from the night air, and I brought my mouth to his. This kiss was different from all the others. It was the kiss of absolute sovereignty, the ratification of a love that had survived legal obligation, public scrutiny, and the death of a good woman. He gathered me close, his arms locking around my waist, pulling me flush against the hard, solid reality of him. This time there were no clothes to rush through, no secrets to hold back. The physical act became the ultimate ceremony, a sacred communion that erased the 2 years of isolation. He carried me to the bedroom, and as he laid me on the bed, his eyes were clear, focused only on me. The seduction was in the slowness, the reverence with which he explored the lines of my body, mapping me not as a lover, but as a discoverer finding his promised land. The intimacy that followed was devastating in its honesty. Every touch was an articulation of the longing that had defined our lives. When he finally joined me, it was a slow, deliberate act of coming home. He moved with a rhythm born of deep familiarity and absolute necessity, watching me, ensuring that my pleasure mirrored the freedom of his heart. The culmination was a shattering release, a violent expulsion of 2 years of suppressed truth. We lay tangled, bathed in sweat, and the light of a new dawn breaking over the city. "I'm sorry, Audrey," he whispered, his voice rough against my skin. "I'm sorry for the lie, for the pain, for the time we lost." I ran my hand over his jaw, feeling the stubble, the reality of him. "We didn't lose time, Preston. We earned this time. We earned this truth." I looked into his eyes that were now completely unguarded, completely mine. The billionaire was gone. The widower was gone. Only the man remained. And he was finally, beautifully, devastatingly seen by the woman who had always been his true wife. The marriage of convenience was over, and the marriage of necessity had just begun. The world still talks about Preston Vance and the swiftness of his second marriage, to me, his former head designer, just a year after his wife's passing. They saw callous celebration at a funeral. They saw betrayal. They saw a scandalous mogul. But we saw an end to the charade. We saw a man who protected 2 women simultaneously, the one he had already loved and lost, and the one he couldn't afford to lose. We saw a woman, Juniper, who made the ultimate noble sacrifice, and a woman, me, who found the strength to hold the line for the greater, hidden good. If you ever find yourself fighting for a love that the world doesn't understand, ask yourself, is this betrayal or is this protection? Is your partner hiding a lie, or are they shielding a greater, more complicated truth? The moral of the story is this: true love is not always a public parade. Sometimes it is a quiet war fought in the shadows, demanding the kind of faith and patience that can only be rewarded by an earned peace. Don't judge the truth by the headline. Judge it by the heart that holds it. Because every storm passes, and every lie, no matter how vast, must finally dissolve into the light of the morning.